Wanted to provide a video to talk to you a little bit about the action project. The action project starts this week and you get a total of 3 weeks to complete the assignment. So you'll want to be sure that you understand all of the components and that you also take a moment to kind of figure out a time management timeline, right? What parts are you going to work on week by week? So I'm going to start by going down to the section where everything is, and you'll see the action project guidelines. You all can read, and I trust that you'll be able to do that. But essentially, you're going to take what you've learned from your community assessment and write up what you would envision a work based learning program or experience to really look like. So, give a detailed description of the program. Is it a series of workshops? Is it an experience? Is it an after school program? Who's the targeted population, right? You might be working with students or adults with disabilities. You might be working with juniors and seniors at a high school. You might be working with non-traditional students at a community college or a university. You might be working with juveniles working on reentry, right? So you can think about what population you would want to serve, but you want to be sure that you make the connection between why the program that you're describing and quote unquote creating really makes the most sense for that population. You're going to give program goals and objectives. You will talk about also learning objectives for the actual participants, and I've given you examples that you can model after. You'll want to talk about supports, right? Who do you need to create a partnership with in order for this program to work? What types of equipments and materials will you need? How much money will this cost, right? So this is assuming that maybe you're going to put this program together and hope that you can write grant applications for it later down the road. So really having you think through what it takes. If I wanted to do some job training with adults, I would need a space. So maybe I would want to get a partnership with the local community center who maybe has this space, and they would allow me to rent it from them to be able to have consistent access to their classrooms, what have you. You'll also want to talk a little bit more about the focus of the program. So you've identified that you want to do a 1 week summer camp experience for sophomores and juniors in high school. So the experience and the population, you want to focus on the topic. Is it going to be on coding? If it's on coding, you're going to talk to me about why it's on coding and really focus on including some outside research, some stats, some figures into the paper where you can really say, this isn't just an idea that I have and that I want to get funded. I'm able to articulate that there is a need for what I want to do. Another thing that you're going to do is talk about the techniques that you're going to use to facilitate what we call learning transfer. How are they going to be able to use what you've given them in other instances? And there's a resource specific in As You Learn that I'm going to show you for that. So the first part of it is really traditional report style, paper style, where you give all of the information that is needed. While I have not outlined a specific page count, I want to stress to you that you need to be as detailed as possible, because a lot of times we have things up in our heads that make sense, but it needs to make sense to an outsider reading it. I would say that this section of the paper should not be less than 5 pages. I would imagine that maybe fall within the 7 to 8, but this is a rough guess. So don't hold yourself to any of that. Tables, charts, graphs, like anything that you want to put in there. You don't have any specifications about how you can do that using bullet list or numbered list. If it fits, do what works for you, but be as thorough as you possibly can for each of these items. The appendix is just going to be supplemental files that help me understand the vision that you've created. So you're going to create a sample instructional plan. So you're going to choose one day, one time frame of your session or your program and create an instructional plan a lesson plan of sorts, but there has been a template provided on As You Learn that you can use. If you read this notes, it says that you can use a template that you have. Just email me and let's make sure that it's sufficient to kind of provide all of the level of detail that would be necessary for that. You're going to do a sample assessment to measure the participants' knowledge or skill. So they're coming to you to participate in some type of experience, series of sessions, workshops, what have you. You're going to want to do something to check for understanding. So if you think about this in the space of a traditional classroom, we might give students a project that they have to do or a quiz that they have to do. So the options would be endless there. You're also going to do a program evaluation portion of it. You're going to have some resources on As You Learn for this, but you are required to do a questionnaire that the participants will take. And so if you go to As You Learn and look at your resources, you're going to have a short form example and a long form example. Think about the fact that you have probably been in professional development or workshop sessions, and at the end of it, they say, don't forget to take the survey. That's essentially what you're doing. A short form example that you've been provided is going to be most fitting for a younger audience, so high school group, maybe up to maybe 20-ish. The long form is more fitting for adults, and this again also takes into consideration the population. If you're working with a population that has disabilities or specific disability that you're catering to, you'll want to be accommodating and modify where you need to for that. You have the option after the required questionnaire is to incorporate more techniques for collecting data to better evaluate the overall program. There is going to be a resource that I'll show you that you can use. An example of this was maybe you're going to want to hold a focus group to collect data with folks. Maybe you're going to want students to put together their portfolio and submit an additional copy where your portfolios serve as a way to evaluate your program. Another component of this is going to be a promotional or marketing item. You want to think about the audience and think about an option that makes the most sense for them. This would be something that you would put together, assuming that this program is actually going to happen and be funded, and now you have to entice them to participate. So you're going to want to be mindful of your audience. The way that you advertise to high school students is probably going to be different than the way that you would advertise to adults. At the end of all this, as always, in our field, it's necessary for us to be reflective practitioners where we reflect on our practice. You are going to address your thought processes throughout this assignment. What was easy for you? What was difficult for you? Why was that easy? Why was that difficult? What items were really getting you amped up about it? It's just like, yes, I can't wait to put the instructional plan together. Or maybe it was the research portion that was fun for you. And then on the flip side, maybe the research section was difficult for you because there's not a lot out there on your subject area and you had to really pry to get some stuff together. So maybe that was difficult for you. Or maybe putting the instructional materials was difficult for you because you couldn't really put together or kind of translate the vision in your head into words and what it would look like in the space of a lesson plan. At the end of that reflection, you'll also want to provide a discussion about the need for something like this to happen in your community. So you're going to go back to that community-based assessment to say, in my community, there is a void in XYZ serving ABCD population. And I believe that if something like this were to happen, this is the benefit that the community would gain. But then on the flip side of that too, you want to speak to the likelihood. Do you think that you could realistically get people to rally behind a cause like this? Something else that you're going to want to do is obviously adhere to formatting. So once you get to that research section of the paper, you're going to need to focus on proper APA citations in the text, in parentheses, using years when things were published, and obviously a title page because I'll be downloading everybody's reports and need to look over those. So part one is everything written all the background, all the overview for me to really take in all the good detail of what this action project is that you are envisioning. The second part of this assignment focuses on the PowerPoint presentation. This is going to be pretty self-explanatory, but we have a presentation week set aside where each student will post their PowerPoint explaining the project that they came up with to a forum, and that way we can expose all of our colleagues to the ideas that we've come up with. So you'll want to make sure that you highlight these particular things in the PowerPoint. Obviously, we know that our slides aren't going to be text heavy, so you'll definitely want to do some audio overview of the PowerPoint, offering the audience more explanation, and we can interact with each other on the forum about these presentations, okay? So I'll give you all time to consume this. I'll have a questions forum set up where we can ask all types of questions about the action project. What I want to do now is show you some of the resources. And if based on questions that I get from students, I'll continue to find resources and add resources. But this is a sample instructional plan. I will create a blank Word document version of this so that you can fill out what needs to happen. So remember, for your instructional plan, I mentioned that you will want to focus on one day, one block of time. This one really focuses on the early morning. And so they talk about everything that they're going to do from the start of the day up until probably lunchtime. So their learning objectives, their key points that they need to emphasize, what they're going to be doing as the instructional kind of techniques to get folks moving and involved with the content, having an active learning environment, and then the time limits associated with that. They have notes down here to remind them you need to set up the room a certain way. This is how you're going to assess them during this time frame. The instructor needs these materials. The students will need these materials. So this is a really kind of basic instructional plan where the person delivering the instruction took some time to kind of provide themselves with an outline of how to progress through the day, the same way that teachers would a lesson plan. The level of detail required on various templates will vary. So if you like this one and you want to stick with it, that's totally fine. Again, you want to be sure to email me a template to say, hey, what do you think about this? I'm definitely willing to look at anybody's progress in their materials throughout this time frame. So I don't want you all to get to the end of the submission and for some reason have totally missed the mark. We talked about transfer for learning. These are techniques where you can facilitate a learning transfer. How do they take what you've given them and be able to take that back or take that into how this program will launch them in the workplace, in school, on the job search, that kind of thing. You probably will want to hang out in the individual technique space. Group techniques and individual and in groups, I've given you the whole thing. You can definitely pick and choose, but it would probably be difficult even in envisioning this idea and in a real world setting to have these group techniques to be able to get this same group of people back together or hang on to them over a certain period of time. So maybe looking at some individual techniques will better serve you there. These are the questionnaire samples that I referenced. You can get these loaded. Short form, rate this. How did it go for you based on these questions with a couple of open-ended, right? A high school student should be able to complete something like this in the form of a short form. However, a long form breaks up and says, we want feedback on this thing and this thing and this thing, right? So we have a part 1 on the session content. How was that for you? Then rate me as the presenter. How was that for me? Rate the logistics with the room set up and getting registered for the program. And then the overall program with suggestions for improvement, right? So we're asking more questions, but more pointed questions at the same time. And the way that questionnaires like this work is people have evaluation teams that will put all of this together to really be able to say the folks struggled with logistics. So the next time we do this, we need to think about how we can better improve the registration process, or maybe the environment. Maybe we need to get a different partner for space, kinds of things. Obviously, this is just an idea or a vision that you have, but I thought that I'd take a moment to just kind of explain why this is important should you be putting something together in your actual work-based learning or teaching roles that you'll have. This additional document here is what I was mentioning when I said that you have the option outside of the required questionnaire that you design, that you can add in other techniques for collecting evaluation data for this program. So it goes through a series of different things that you can do. I would encourage you to consider one or two of these, but really think about which ones would match the population that you'd be working with. Okay? So from this section here, by the time you see it updated, this video will be added. The question form will be added for you, and a blank template of this instructional plan will be added for you. I'm extremely excited that we've reached this portion of the class where you all can really spend time envisioning opportunities for folks. I can't wait to see the level of creativity that will come across my desk as a result. Thanks so much, guys. I look forward to reviewing your projects. Take care.